It started as a quiet evening at Crescent Park, the kind of night where stars seem to hang lower in the sky. 16-year-old Mia Campbell sat on a bench, scrolling through her phone, when a piercing hum froze her blood. Looking up, her breath hitched. A massive, silent, disc-shaped craft hovered above the treetops, glowing faintly blue. Seconds later, her phone screen distorted, static filling her ears. What happened next wasn't just bizarre. It shattered her reality, leaving her questioning the nature of existence itself. Mia Campbell was known for her grounded, no-nonsense nature, the type of teenager who never believed in the paranormal. But that evening at Crescent Park, her reality began to unravel in ways she could never imagine. It started as an ordinary night. The small town of Willow Creek was silent, the streets quiet except for the occasional chirping of crickets. A cool breeze rustled the leaves of the towering oaks that bordered Crescent Park. Mia had come here to escape the monotony of home life. Sitting on a creaky bench, she scrolled through her phone, alternating between social media and a lo-fi playlist. The air suddenly grew thick, as if charged with static. At first, Mia dismissed it as a strange weather shift, but then a faint hum began to vibrate through the park, a low, resonant sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't loud, but it pierced her senses, making her stomach churn. "What the hell?" Mia muttered, pausing her music. She glanced around, expecting to see someone playing a prank or a nearby drone, but the park was eerily empty, and the sound only grew louder. Then she saw it. Hovering above the tallest treetops was a massive, disc-shaped object. Its surface was smooth, almost liquid-like, reflecting faint moonlight in rippling waves. A soft blue glow emanated from its underside, bathing the park in an otherworldly light. Mia's breath caught as she stared, frozen in awe and terror. For a moment, she thought it might be some kind of advanced military aircraft. Willow Creek wasn't far from a base, and rumors of experiments had floated around. But the way the object moved, silent, smooth, and unnaturally fast, defied anything she'd ever seen in fiction, let alone real life. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she tried to unlock it. The screen flickered with static before going black. "No, no, no," she hissed, smacking it in frustration. She glanced back up at the craft, which now seemed to be descending slowly, as if it had noticed her. "Okay, this isn't happening. This is a dream," she whispered, pinching her arm hard enough to leave a mark. But the pain only confirmed her fear. This was real. As the craft drew closer, the hum grew deafening, making her teeth ache and her ears buzz. A sudden beam of light shot down from the center of the craft, illuminating a spot just a few feet away from her. The light wasn't like any she'd seen before. It was thick, almost tangible, with a faint swirling motion, as if alive. Mia's instincts screamed at her to run, but her legs refused to move. She was rooted to the spot, her eyes locked on the glowing beam. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the light vanished, leaving the park in pitch-black darkness. For a moment, everything was silent. The hum was gone. The air felt normal again, and Mia almost convinced herself that she had imagined the whole thing. But then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was a boy, no older than 8, standing in the exact spot where the beam had touched the ground. His clothes were soaked as if he had been caught in a downpour, and his hair stuck to his pale face. He shivered violently, his arms wrapped tightly around his chest, but his eyes were empty, staring straight ahead with a vacant expression that made Mia's skin crawl. "Hey," she called out hesitantly, her voice trembling. "Are you okay?" The boy didn't respond. He didn't even blink. He just stood there, his lips moving slightly as if whispering something inaudible. Gathering her courage, Mia took a cautious step closer, squinting to make out his features in the dim light. That's when she realized he was holding something, a small silver object shaped like a star. The boy suddenly turned his head to face her, and Mia's heart nearly stopped. His lips parted, and he whispered a single phrase that sent chills racing down her spine. They're watching. Before Mia could react, her phone, which had been dead moments ago, buzzed violently in her pocket. She yanked it out, only to see the screen filled with static again. A distorted voice crackled through the speakers, speaking words she couldn't understand. It sounded like a language, but not one she had ever heard, high-pitched and garbled like a recording played in reverse. "Who's watching?" she demanded, louder this time. But the boy didn't answer. Instead, he dropped the star-shaped object and bolted into the woods, disappearing into the shadows as if he had never been there. Mia stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, her mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, to get as far away from the park as possible, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her phone buzzed again, this time displaying a single word across the static-filled screen. "Run!" Mia didn't need to be told twice. She turned on her heels and sprinted out of the park, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, the hum returned, louder and more menacing than before. She didn't dare look back. Whatever was out there, she didn't want to see it. When she finally reached her car, she slammed the door shut and locked it, her hands shaking so badly that she could barely get the key into the ignition. As the engine roared to life, she stole one last glance at the park. The craft was gone. The hum had stopped, but the sense of dread lingered, clawing at her chest like a living thing. Driving home, Mia couldn't shake the boy's vacant stare or the cryptic warning he had given her. She didn't know what she had just witnessed, but deep down, she knew one thing for certain. Her life would never be the same again. Mia didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the boy's pale face, his vacant stare, and the cryptic words he had whispered. "They're watching." She couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was still out there, observing her every move. By morning, she decided she couldn't keep this to herself. Her best friend, Ryan Hayes, had always been the logical one, the skeptic who would keep her grounded. If anyone could help her make sense of this, it was him. Mia picked up her phone, relieved to see it working again, and called Ryan. "Can you come over? I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. "What's wrong?" he asked, his tone immediately concerned. "Just, please, it's important," she replied. Ryan didn't press further and promised to be there within the hour. When he arrived, Mia led him to her room, shutting the door behind them. She wasted no time, recounting everything she had seen and heard the night before. Ryan listened, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "A UFO? A glowing beam? And some random kid just appeared out of nowhere?" he asked, his voice skeptical. "I know how it sounds," Mia said, running her hands through her hair. "But I'm not making this up. It was real." "Okay," he said, processing. "What about the boy? Did you call the police?" Mia shook her head. "What was I supposed to tell them? That he disappeared into thin air? They'd think I'm crazy." Ryan sighed. "All right, let's go to the park. Maybe there's something there, some kind of evidence." The two of them arrived at the park just before noon. It looked completely normal, peaceful even. Families walked their dogs, kids played on the swings, and laughter filled the air. It was hard to believe anything unusual had happened here less than 24 hours ago. Mia led Ryan to the spot where the beam of light had touched the ground. "It was right here," she said. Ryan crouched down, examining the area. "There's nothing here," he said. "No scorch marks, no disturbed soil. Nothing." "I'm telling you, this is where it happened," Mia insisted. "Maybe it was just a dream," Ryan suggested. "You've been stressed. Sometimes the mind plays tricks." Mia stopped mid-argument when she noticed something glinting in the sunlight. She knelt and picked it up, a small silver object shaped like a star. "It's his," she whispered, holding it up for Ryan to see. Ryan took the object, turning it over in his hands. "It looks like a charm," he said. "Where did he get this?" Before Mia could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, but the screen was filled with static again. Her heart raced as a distorted voice crackled through the speakers. "Coordinates. Follow. Truth," the voice said, cutting in and out. "What the hell is that?" Ryan asked. "I don't know," Mia said, her hands shaking, "but it's giving me coordinates." The numbers pointed to a location outside of town, deep in the woods. Was this a trap? Or was it the key to understanding what had happened? "We're not seriously going, are we?" Ryan asked. "We have to," Mia said. "I need to know." Reluctantly, Ryan agreed. The drive took nearly an hour, the paved roads giving way to gravel paths. By the time they arrived, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the dense forest. "This is it," Mia said, checking her phone. The coordinates had led them to a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. In the center was a circle of symbols etched into the ground. They glowed faintly, pulsing with energy. "What the hell is this?" Ryan whispered. "I don't know," Mia said. "It looks like some kind of ritual site." Ryan crouched, running his fingers over the symbols. "These markings, they're not random. They're organized, like a code." As he spoke, the symbols began to glow brighter. The ground trembled and a low hum filled the air. Mia's phone buzzed violently, the static replaced by a new message. "You were warned." "Mia, we need to go," Ryan said, his voice urgent. Before they could move, a beam of light shot down from above, illuminating the circle. The light was blinding, forcing them to shield their eyes. When it finally faded, the clearing was empty, but the symbols had burned into the ground, leaving behind an eerie, smoldering pattern. "We're leaving." "Now," Ryan said, grabbing Mia's arm. As they ran back to the car, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see the boy or the craft. But the forest was silent, the shadows stretching longer with each passing moment. When they reached the car, Mia fumbled with the keys, her hands trembling. As the engine roared to life, her phone buzzed again. She didn't want to look, but she couldn't stop herself. The screen displayed a single word. "Run." Mia couldn't shake the word flashing on her phone screen. "Run." Her breath hitched, her hands gripping the steering wheel as the car sped away from the forest. Ryan sat beside her, silent for the first time since they'd left the clearing. The weight of what they had witnessed bore down on both of them. "What the hell was that, Mia?" Ryan finally broke the silence, his voice low, almost shaking. "I don't know," Mia said, keeping her eyes fixed on the road. "But whatever it wasn't human." Ryan shook his head, running his hands through his hair. That light, those symbols, they didn't just look like a code. They felt alive. It's like it was trying to tell us something. Mia glanced at him briefly before looking back at the road. Or it was trying to warn us. And I think we made a mistake coming here. The drive back into town felt longer than the drive out. Every shadow cast by the trees seemed to stretch endlessly, and the hum from the forest still echoed faintly in Mia's ears. Her phone buzzed again, and she nearly swerved off the road. Ryan grabbed the phone from her lap. "Keep your eyes on the road. I'll look." His face went pale as he stared at the screen. "Mia, it's another message." "What does it say?" she asked, her voice tight. Ryan hesitated. "It says, 'He's here.'" Mia's knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel. "Who's here?" Before Ryan could respond, the car's headlights flickered. The dashboard lights dimmed, and the engine sputtered. "No, no, no," Mia muttered, pressing harder on the gas pedal. The car slowed to a crawl before coming to a complete stop. "What the hell is happening?" Ryan asked, panic creeping into his voice. Mia turned the key in the ignition, but the car wouldn't start. She looked around, her heart racing. The road was empty, flanked by dense trees that seemed to close in on them. The night was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that pressed down on her chest. "We need to get out of here," Mia said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "Let's walk. There's no way I'm staying in this car." Ryan hesitated, but the look on Mia's face convinced him to follow. They grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the cool night air. The forest loomed on either side of the road, its shadows seeming to move as the flashlight beam swept over them. "Do you hear that?" Ryan whispered as they walked. Mia strained her ears. At first, she heard nothing, but then it came, a faint humming, low and steady, just like the sound they had heard in the park. Her stomach dropped. "It's the same sound," she said, her voice barely audible. "The one from the craft." Ryan turned to her, his face pale. "We need to keep moving." The humming grew louder with each step, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. Mia's phone buzzed again and she pulled it out with trembling hands. The screen was filled with static, but a faint outline of a figure appeared in the distortion. "Mia," Ryan said, his voice trailing off. He was staring at something behind her. She turned slowly, the flashlight shaking in her grip. Standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by the faint moonlight, was the boy. His pale face was streaked with tears, and his lips moved as if he were whispering something. But there was no sound. "It's him," Mia said, her voice cracking. "It's the boy." The boy took a step forward, and Mia instinctively stepped back. "What do you want?" she called out, her voice trembling. The boy raised his hand, pointing to something behind them. Mia and Ryan turned, their flashlight beam catching a glimpse of something metallic glinting in the distance. It was the craft. Hovering just above the treetops, its faint blue glow pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. "We need to run," Mia said, grabbing Ryan's arm. "Now." They took off down the road, the hum growing louder with every step. The light from the craft intensified, casting eerie shadows that seemed to reach for them. Mia didn't dare look back. Her only focus was on the path ahead, on putting as much distance between them and the craft as possible. But then, the ground beneath them shook violently, sending both of them sprawling. The flashlight rolled out of Ryan's hand, its beam flickering before going dark. Mia scrambled to her feet, pulling Ryan up with her. "We can't stop!" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the deafening hum. Ryan nodded, his face set with determination. They ran until their lungs burned, until the hum began to fade and the glow of the craft was no longer visible. Finally, they collapsed onto the side of the road, gasping for air. Mia's phone buzzed again, and she hesitated before looking at the screen. This time, the message was different. It read, "You've been marked." "What does that mean?" Ryan asked, his voice shaking. Mia didn't answer. She didn't know what it meant, but the weight of those words settled heavily in her chest. Whatever was happening, it wasn't over, and somehow she knew it was only going to get worse. The word "marked" lingered in Mia's mind, heavy and suffocating as she and Ryan made their way back into town. The adrenaline from their escape had worn off, leaving them both drained and unnervingly quiet. Every passing streetlight felt like a cruel spotlight, exposing the fear etched into their faces. "What do you think it means?" Ryan finally asked, breaking the silence. Mia gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I don't know, but I don't think it's good." Her phone buzzed again, the sound making both of them jump. Ryan grabbed it from the cup holder before she could. His face paled as he read the message aloud. "Time's running out." Mia's breath caught. "What does that even mean?" "I don't know, but we need to figure it out. Fast," Ryan replied, his voice strained. "This isn't random, Mia. It's like it's targeting us." Mia nodded, her eyes darting between the road and the phone in Ryan's hands. She had no idea who or what was sending these messages, but she knew one thing for sure. They were being hunted. They pulled into Mia's driveway a few minutes later. The house was dark, the curtains drawn, but the sense of unease followed them inside. Mia flicked on the lights, half expecting to see the boy standing in her living room. When she didn't, she let out a shaky breath. "We need to retrace everything," Ryan said, setting the phone on the table. "What happened in the park, in the clearing? Maybe there's something we missed." Mia nodded, sitting across from him. She stared at the star-shaped charm they had found in the park, turning it over in her hands. "It all started with him," she murmured. "The boy. He's connected to this somehow." Ryan leaned forward. "What did he say to you? Exactly?" Mia hesitated, the memory sending chills down her spine. "He said, 'They're watching,' and then he disappeared." Ryan rubbed his temples, his frustration clear. "Who's they? And why you? Why us?" Before Mia could answer, her phone lit up again. This time there was no text, just a video. Ryan tapped on the screen, and the footage sent a shiver down Mia's spine. It was a live feed of the street outside her house. The camera slowly panned across the dark road, stopping just in front of her driveway. "They're here," Ryan whispered. Mia's heart pounded as she bolted to the window, pulling back the curtain. The street was empty, the faint glow of the streetlights illuminating nothing but parked cars and scattered leaves. "There's no one out there," she said, her voice trembling. "Then how do they have a live feed?" Ryan asked, his voice rising. The phone buzzed again, the screen now displaying a countdown. 4:59, 4:58, 4:57. "What's happening?" Mia asked, panic creeping into her voice. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here," Ryan said, grabbing her arm. "Whatever this is, we can't stay." Mia hesitated. Her home was the only place that had ever felt safe. But now, it felt like a trap. She grabbed the charm and her phone before following Ryan out the door. The moment they stepped outside, the hum returned. It was faint at first, but it grew louder with each passing second. The air felt heavy, charged with static, and Mia's skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Ryan nodded, his eyes scanning the street. "It's the same sound, from the park." Mia's phone buzzed again, the countdown now at 3:12. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. "We don't have much time." "Get in the car," Ryan said, his voice urgent. "We need to get as far away from here as possible." Mia didn't argue. They climbed into the car and she turned the key in the ignition. To her relief, the engine roared to life. She backed out of the driveway and sped down the street, her heart racing. As they drove, the hum seemed to follow them, growing louder and more oppressive. Mia glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. The craft was there, hovering just above the treetops, its faint blue glow pulsing rhythmically. "They're following us," she said, her voice shaking. Ryan turned to look, his face pale. "What do they want?" "I don't know," Mia replied, her grip on the steering wheel tightening. "But we can't let them catch us." The countdown on her phone continued to tick down. 1:45, 1:44, 1:43. "We're running out of time," Ryan said, his voice barely audible. Mia's mind raced. She had no plan, no idea where to go. All she knew was that they couldn't stop. Not yet. Not until they were safe. But then, the ground beneath them began to shake. The car swerved and Mia struggled to keep control. The hum was deafening now, vibrating through her bones. Ahead of them, the road was bathed in an eerie blue light. "They're cutting us off," Ryan shouted. Mia slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt. The light grew brighter, enveloping them completely. Mia shielded her eyes, her heart pounding as the hum reached a crescendo. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the light disappeared. The hum faded, leaving behind an eerie silence. Mia lowered her hands, her breath shaky. The craft was gone. "What just happened?" Ryan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Mia didn't answer. She didn't know. All she knew was that the countdown on her phone had stopped at 0 Giichu. The silence after the craft's disappearance was deafening. Mia and Ryan sat in the stalled car, too stunned to move. The countdown on her phone had stopped at 0 Igrirs. But no explosion or immediate danger followed. The eerie calm was almost worse than the chaos. "Mia," Ryan whispered, "why did it stop? What does it want?" "I don't know," Mia said, her voice shaky. Her hands trembled as she gripped the wheel. "But I think this is far from over." The street was dark, the moon hidden behind clouds. Mia turned the key in the ignition, but the engine sputtered. A chill ran through her as she glanced at her phone. The screen was dark now, as if whatever force had been controlling it had let go. Ryan shifted, his face pale. "We can't stay here. If that thing comes back—" Mia nodded, grabbing the flashlight from the glove compartment. "We'll have to walk. There's a gas station about a mile up the road." They stepped out, the cool night air biting at their skin. The hum was gone, but unease lingered, pressing against them like an invisible weight. Mia kept the flashlight trained ahead, her heart pounding with every step. "What if it's watching us?" Ryan asked, his voice barely audible. "It probably is," Mia replied, gripping the flashlight tighter. "But we don't have a choice." The road stretched endlessly, flanked by dense woods. Every rustle of leaves sent Mia's nerves on edge. She glanced at Ryan, who clutched the star-shaped charm they had found in the park. "Why are you holding that?" she asked. Ryan looked down at the charm. "It feels important, like it's connected to everything that's happening." Mia didn't respond. She didn't want to think about what the charm meant or how it tied into the boy and the craft. She just wanted to survive. The gas station finally came into view, its neon sign flickering weakly. Mia quickened her pace, relief flooding through her. As they approached, the hum returned. Mia froze, the flashlight shaking in her hand. The sound was faint at first, but it grew louder. Ryan's face twisted in fear as he clutched the charm tighter. "It's here," he whispered. The ground beneath them vibrated, the hum pulsing through their bodies. Mia turned toward the woods, her flashlight beam catching a faint blue glow through the trees. Her stomach churned. "We have to keep moving," she said, her voice firm despite the terror clawing at her chest. They broke into a run, the gas station just a few hundred feet away. The hum grew deafening, and the blue light intensified, casting eerie shadows across the road. Mia didn't dare look back. Her only focus was on reaching the station, on putting as much distance as possible between them and whatever was out there. They burst through the gas station doors, startling the lone clerk behind the counter. He looked up, his expression shifting from boredom to alarm as he took in their disheveled appearances. "Are you kids okay?" he asked. "No," Mia said, out of breath. "We need to use your phone." The clerk gestured toward a landline behind the counter. Mia picked it up, her hands trembling as she dialed 911. The line crackled, but no one answered. She slammed the receiver down, panic rising in her chest. "It's not working," she said, turning to Ryan. Before he could respond, the hum stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. Mia glanced out the window, half expecting to see the craft hovering above, but the night was still, the blue light gone. "What's going on?" the clerk asked, stepping back from the counter. "You two need to tell me." Mia opened her mouth to respond, but her phone buzzed before she could speak. She pulled it from her pocket, dread pooling in her stomach. The screen displayed a single word: "Inside." Ryan grabbed her arm. "Mia, it means us. It's inside." The fluorescent lights flickered, the hum returning at a low, steady pitch. The air grew heavy, charged with electricity. The clerk looked around, confused and alarmed. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice rising. The glass door shattered, sending shards flying across the floor. Mia and Ryan ducked behind a shelf, their hearts pounding. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls. And then it appeared. A figure stepped through the broken door, its silhouette framed by the flickering neon sign. It wasn't the boy this time. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs elongated and unnatural. Its glowing eyes locked onto Mia and Ryan with an intensity that made her blood run cold. Ryan clutched the charm, his hands trembling. "What do we do?" Mia didn't have an answer. The creature took a step forward, the hum rising in pitch. The clerk let out a terrified scream, but it was cut short as the creature turned its gaze on him. He froze, his body rigid, his eyes wide. "Don't move," Mia whispered to Ryan, her voice barely audible. The creature tilted its head, its glowing eyes narrowing. It raised a hand, pointing directly at them. The hum reached a fever pitch, and the lights above exploded, plunging the station into darkness. Mia grabbed Ryan's hand, pulling him toward the back of the store. They stumbled through the aisles, the creature's footsteps echoing behind them. The emergency exit loomed ahead, its red sign glowing faintly in the darkness. "Run," Mia whispered, shoving Ryan toward the door. They burst through the exit, the cool night air hitting their faces. The hum was still there, but it seemed farther away. They didn't stop running until they reached the edge of the woods, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. "What was that?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," Mia said, clutching the charm in her hand, "but I think it's only the beginning." The woods wrapped Mia and Ryan in silence, broken only by the faint hum in the distance. The glow from the gas station had faded, replaced by thick darkness. Mia tightened her grip on the flashlight, its weak beam barely piercing the night. "Where are we going?" Ryan whispered. "Anywhere but here," Mia replied, her voice firm despite her fear. She glanced at the charm in Ryan's hand. "We need to figure out why this matters. Why us?" Ryan nodded. The weight of everything they'd seen hung over them. The boy's words echoed in Mia's mind. "They're watching." The hum grew louder, no longer distant. Mia stopped abruptly, raising a hand. Ryan froze. The ground beneath them vibrated faintly, then stronger, like a warning. "It's coming," Mia whispered. Ryan's grip tightened on the charm. "What do we do?" "Hide, now." Mia scanned the woods, her heart racing. They scrambled behind a fallen tree, crouching low. Mia switched off the flashlight, plunging them into darkness. The hum became deafening, and a blue light washed over the forest, illuminating the trees in an unearthly glow. Mia's breath hitched as she saw it. The craft. Hovering just above the treetops, its surface rippled like liquid metal. Symbols glowed faintly along its surface, brighter than they had been in the park. It moved methodically, as though searching for something, or someone. "Don't move," Mia mouthed to Ryan, gripping his arm tightly. The craft paused directly above them, its light intensifying. Mia's heart pounded so loudly she thought it would betray them. Seconds stretched into eternity. And then it was gone. The hum faded, the blue light disappearing into the night. Mia opened her eyes, trembling with relief. Ryan let out a shaky breath. "That was too close," he whispered. Mia nodded. "We need to keep moving. If it's looking for us, we can't stay." They pressed deeper into the woods. Mia's phone buzzed, startling her. She pulled it from her pocket, dread pooling in her stomach. A message flashed on the screen. "Turn around." "What does it mean?" Ryan asked, his voice shaking. Mia turned to look behind them. At first, there was only darkness. Then, a faint glow emerged through the trees. Orange flickering like fire. "What is that?" Ryan asked. "I don't know," Mia said, "but we need to find out." They moved cautiously toward the light. As they drew closer, the smell of smoke reached them. The trees thinned, revealing a clearing bathed in the glow of a massive bonfire. Figures surrounded it, their faces obscured by masks carved with the same symbols as the craft. Mia and Ryan ducked behind a tree, watching in silence. The figures chanted in unison, their voices low and rhythmic. Suspended above the fire, glowing faintly, was the boy. "It's him," Ryan whispered. The boy hung motionless, his eyes closed. The symbols on his skin pulsed faintly with the rhythm of the chanting. "What are they doing to him?" Mia asked. "I don't know," Ryan said, "but we can't just stand here." Mia hesitated. The sight before her was terrifying, otherworldly. But Ryan was right. Whatever the boy was, they couldn't leave him to this fate. "We need a distraction," Mia said. She glanced at the charm in Ryan's hand. "Give me that." Ryan hesitated, then handed it over. "What are you going to do?" "Something stupid," Mia muttered. She stepped out from behind the tree, holding the charm high. The chanting stopped abruptly, every masked figure turning toward her. The boy's eyes opened, glowing with an intensity that made Mia's breath catch. The figures began moving toward her, their steps slow but deliberate. The fire flared brighter. Mia's heart raced, but she stood her ground. "Leave him alone," she shouted. "Whatever you're doing, stop it." The figures paused. One stepped forward, its mask larger and more ornate. It raised a hand, pointing directly at Mia. The hum returned, vibrating through her body. Mia's knees buckled, but she forced herself to stay upright. "If you want him, you'll have to go through me." The figure lowered its hand, and for a moment the hum ceased. Then the boy spoke. "Run," he whispered, his voice echoing in her mind. Before Mia could react, the clearing erupted into chaos. The fire exploded outward, sending the masked figures scattering. The boy fell from his suspension, landing heavily. Mia and Ryan ran to him, pulling him to his feet. "We need to go," Mia shouted. The boy's glowing eyes met hers. "You can't run forever." Mia didn't have time to question him. The masked figures regrouped, their chants rising again. The hum returned, accompanied by the faint glow of the craft above the clearing. "Come on!" Ryan shouted, pulling Mia and the boy toward the trees. They ran, the forest blurring around them. The hum grew louder, the glow brighter. Mia's lungs burned, her legs screaming, but she didn't stop. As they broke through the edge of the woods, the craft descended, its light bathing them in blue. Mia turned, shielding the boy with her body. The hum reached a crescendo, and for a moment everything was light and sound. And then, silence. When Mia opened her eyes, the craft was gone. The boy lay unconscious beside her, his skin no longer glowing. Ryan knelt next to him, pale. "What now?" he asked. Mia looked up at the night sky, her heart heavy. "I don't know," she said, "but this isn't over." Above them, the stars flickered unnaturally as though watching.